here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week is going to be the turn of the American guitarist, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. It is Chris Wilson, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, and all that other groovy stuff. Was in the band which we all love, the Flamin Groovies, and wrote or co-wrote Shake Some Action. Was also in the Barracudas for quite a few years. Has released a phenomenal amount of albums and solo projects, but you're going to find out everything and more about Chris and his amazing life in his interview. Take notes, I will test you at the end. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Chris, it's over to you.
I suppose it might have been when I was about 12, because I was a very little swatty kind of, young student in Catholic school. And I was classically trained choir boy.
Right.
With all that brings. And I was very kind of snobbish about music, and I was very, very much into classical music. And my brother-in-law, I'd shown some interest in his Spanish guitar. And after every time I would go over to his house and, I wouldn't bother to visit with the family. I'd immediately go over and pick up the guitar and start trying to play it. So for my 12th birthday, he gave it to me. He said, "Here, you've shown such interest in this. I want you to do something with it." So I was over the moon and started. I took some guitar lessons and started learning chords and that. And I became very interested in folk music. Mm. And the early folk artists that that caught my attention were Pete Seeger and the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul, and Mary, people like that. It was great, kind of namby-pamby kind of stuff.
Yes.
But then when the British invasion sort of kicked in '64, I became completely enamored of British rock and roll music.
Yes,
the one for me, mate.
That's. Well, did you also get into people like, was Davy Graham? He released his kind of famous song by then?
Yes, my brother was a big fan of his, and my brother had been in the Air Force and had been stationed in Britain, and brought me back a couple of albums of Davy Graham and Bert Jansch.
Oh God, yes.
The
and
influence.
Was it Ewan McCall as well? Was he?
I knew Ewan briefly before he passed away, and his missus was very good friends with my partner at the time.
Yes, and the Watersons, were they on the scene at that stage?
I do not remember them.
I just remember there was a whole family of these amazing folk singers, and that was quite. So, had you sort of gravitated to a certain beatnik quality, essence at this stage? Actually, you were only 12 at the time, weren't you? So
yeah, I was only a nipper, so I couldn't really participate.
Yes.
Very much.
Well, no, but 12, it's still quite a formative age, isn't it? And that was 1964. So did you suddenly one day go, "Oh my God, look, the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, the Who"? Was that kind of?
Yes, I mean, I knew a lot about song structure and I was very into poetry and. Just especially the Kinks completely captivated me because of their lyrics and
yes.
I remember one of the first promos that I had seen of a video promo of Dead End Street. I can't remember where I saw it now. It was obviously film. I'm trying to think if it might have been at my local cinema, but because they occasionally had playings of like rock recordings and like sort of the latest Beatles clips and stuff like that. And I remember seeing the Kinks' Dead End Street, where it was actually filmed in Little Green Street in London, which was in Kentish Town, where I wound up living years later. And I would often go there and look and say, yeah, that's where they were. My God, all them years ago.
Yes, paying homage. There was an amazing little clip of a very unknown Rod Stewart at that point, sort of walking around London, Rod the Mod, which someone, even though film must have been expensive and quite rare, there was someone that obviously thought, oh, we'll film this guy walking around and also file it and not just throw it in the bin. And then obviously Rod Stewart becomes this megastar. Were you into sort of that world of kind of early mod, movement as well during the 60s? Actually, that was you.
Yes, indeed, I was. Yeah, much to my parents' chagrin, I started, whenever I had any disposable income, I'd buy a pair of, Chelsea boots. And my uniform at the time was Levi's 501s and a Levi jacket and a black turtleneck.
Classic.
Not much.
No change then. Did suddenly people like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and various other poets, the beat poets, did they come into your consciousness at that stage?
No, not till I was about 17 when I started experimenting with psychedelic drugs, and they opened the doors of my perception, as it were.
Yes, dear old Alex. Yes, that was amazing. And were your parents, were they kind of, obviously a bit horrified probably, but what was their kind of background? Were they into popular music or culture or anything like that?
Not really, no. My dad was a very hard-working chap who his family was from the north of Scotland, from Thurso. And my mum's family were French Canadian, and they were born in the early part of the 20th century. So they'd gone through, World War I as children, and the influenza epidemic and the Great Depression, and so they were quite set in their ways. And my dad went to war. He had worked for Hansa Lines as a young man when he was in his teens. He was he worked on ships a lot, and he knew a lot about transportation. He had traveled all over Germany and the Low Countries and France. And so when war broke out, even though he was an American citizen, he came over to Britain and enlisted in the British Army. And he fought extensively through North Africa and Sicily and D-Day. In the meantime, my mum was taking care of a young family, and she was rather a religious fanatic. She was a devout Catholic, and she had no time for the fripperies of popular music of any kind. Sacred music was her thing. She kind of stuck with that.
Yes.
My dad liked big band music immensely.
Yes, I suppose you had the Glenn Miller period, wasn't it, during the Andrews sisters and people like that?
Exactly. Yes.
Nice. My God. So he would he have been sort of fighting Rommel at one, not single-handedly, but would
Yeah.
he have been in that kind of world of Rommel? And I can't remember who the British equivalent was.
It was Monty.
Monty, of
Earl Monty
course.
of can't remember where he was Earl of right now. Anyway, Monty with the moustache. And,
Yes. Oh God. So he would have seen a lot of action, and then D-Day as well.
yes, yeah, my dad, because he knew the area of Caen and the canals where Pegasus Bridge was. He was seconded to the parachute regiment, which was a fledgling British service at the time, and he was fought at Pegasus Bridge and was wounded and went back to England for some months, and then he proceeded to fight up until VE Day.
I mean, God, he was a trooper, wasn't he?
He was a tough guy, and he came back to the States and worked for a very big, shadowy corporation here called the Raytheon Corporation, and he used to advise them on missile transport and stuff like that. And he would one day he came home with a truckload of Hawk missiles, and just to show me, and I was flabbergasted. This was in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was in 1963. I must have been 11, and he had a 45 automatic in the glove box of the truck, and
wow.
it was it was. We were part of it all,
Gosh, well, absolutely, and that's quite something to show your children, isn't it? Really. So then, when you got to sort of the age of 15, that would have been the Summer of Love, 67. I'm doing the maths here, aren't you? By then were you well ensconced with the whole alternative counterculture at this point?
Was absolutely. I remember I went to see Jimi Hendrix in his first appearance in Boston in 67 at. I believe it was Boston Gardens, which was mainly a hockey ring. And I think it was pretty much packed to about 50 or so thousand people. And I was just knocked out. I mean, it was one of the greatest performances I'd ever seen. Well, I was only 15, so I hadn't seen a whole lot. But to be flabbergasted like that at such a young age, it was a formative. It
would have blown most people's brains, wouldn't it? Really, at that point. Then, when you got to 16, did you leave school or stay on for college at this point?
No, I actually quit school because they frog marched me. I'd been hiding from the principal and vice principal for some weeks because I was trying to grow my hair. There was several of us in my junior high school, and I got caught first and frog marched down to the barbershop, and was told I'd either be expelled or I had to have a regular man's haircut, which is military back and sides,
Yes.
So I had no choice. I wasn't quite the age to quit school, but I was determined that would never happen again. And so at the age of 16, I left school. And I was already in a high school group called the Wild Ones, who were playing at dances, local my school's dances and the local high school's dances and parties and whatnot. And we were doing mostly covers, We had a couple of rather lame originals, quite laughable, but we were making good money. I mean, I would make $200 a show at 16, 17 years old. That was nearly as much as my dad made.
Wow, that's amazing. So how long did that band last for?
Oh, only probably 6 or 8 months.
Yes.
And everybody started moving on, to more professional stuff. the age of 17, 18, I fell in with some other guys from Arlington, Massachusetts. I lived in Watertown, this kind of small area of mainly these towns where the beginnings of the American Revolution happened in north of Boston. And I had hooked up with these guys who had a band called Prince and the Paupers, who'd actually done a few recordings, and I was really excited about that. And we played several gigs, but didn't really gel. And by the time I was, I'd had a job by then at a coffee, tea, and spice house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right near Harvard University. And I had a little apartment, was sharing with another couple of dudes, and we were having a good time and, working, playing. There were instruments all around the apartment. And I wasn't really, I'd kind of taken a back seat to thinking about doing it professionally.
Yes.
I didn't see all that much money in it, and I had a decent job. But when I fell in with these guys, and we had a couple of well-paying gigs, and they had come to the decision that it wasn't, Boston was not the place to try to make it, as it were. And they, because they were rather well off, their folks were, so they got some money together and they moved to Los Angeles. And they said, whenever you can, get your crap together and come out. So I did it for about a year, just doing various things. Probably I don't want to talk about them because they were of an illegal nature.
Yes.
I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I wasn't any kind of nasty person, but I was supplying people with things that they needed at the time.
Yes. Recreational fun.
Herbal aids.
Indeed.
Anyway, I had amassed a bit of money and borrowed some money from my sister in, I believe it was, must have been January 1971.
Mm-hmm.
And I flew out to Los Angeles. So I thought I'd surprise these guys. I had their phone number. I got to LAX, and it was quite a culture shock, because Boston, it was kind of 5 below zero and 2 foot of snow in the ground. And I got to Los Angeles and it was 85 with a thick brown pall over the city that was like hard to breathe. And I thought, God, this is something, isn't it? So I called these chaps and said, hey guys, I'm here. They said, okay, where? And I said, I'm at LAX, and they went, oh God, really? Oh, you told me to come out. And they went, yeah, we did, didn't we? So anyway, they came and got me, and they were staying in Laurel Canyon with some girls, and
was it full of beautiful people at this stage?
Sort of, yeah. They were sort of trying to be anyway, and failing miserably. They were far too plebeian and provincial for Los Angeles, I think, and they weren't really getting anywhere. And these girls took an instant dislike to me. So I was then, because I wouldn't play ball with certain arrangements they were making, I was kind of ostracized from their company and found myself with very little money and homeless in Los Angeles at the age of 18.
Mm.
And I was crashing in an empty apartment, an empty house that had belonged to the black comedian Flip Wilson. which was at the top of Laurel Canyon. An old hippie guy had seen me sort of mooching around and said, "Hey, you need somewhere to stay. There's Flip Wilson's house up at the top. Nobody's been there for months, and it's easy to get in the basement." And so I went up there. I was living off people's oranges from their trees, and Schwab's drugstore on Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset Boulevard. I can't remember where Schwab's was. Where was Schwab's?
I want to say Hollywood and Vine, but I'm not too sure.
That's it. It was in Hollywood and Vine, because they had a never empty cup of coffee for 25 cents. So I would go in there and spend some hours. I met some interesting people there. I met Tom Waits when he was very young, trying to do the same thing I was pretty much, which was, get something going.
Yes.
But I was failing miserably, and my money was running low, and I was being accosted by all these crazy, nasty, weird, cultish people down there, like the Tony and Susan Alamo people, who were taking runaways off the street and to their compound in Agua Dulce, and breaking them, and it was really quite horrible, and this is the time of the Manson family and stuff like that. And I think I had run into a couple. One of the guys from the group that he later became a member of Loose Gravel, band that I joined in San Francisco, I'll get to that, had been dating one of Manson's girls called Susan Atkins, who had been who had come from Massachusetts or New Hampshire. I can't remember. She's still in prison, by the way. So I was getting despondent and ready to petition my sisters to send me some money to fly home, when a friend who had been in Prince and the Paupers, the bass player named Phil Cabuzzi, was in San Francisco, and he had heard that I'd come there, and asked these guys where I was, and they said, "Oh, well, Chris, he didn't work out, so he's in LA somewhere." And he said, "Well, you let Chris on his own in Los Angeles." He said, "Get him to the phone tonight, or I'll come down there and hack you all to pieces," which is something quite capable of doing. And so they found me at Schwab's and got me to the phone. And Phil said, "There's a guy up here named Michael Wilhelm," and I had heard of the Charlatans. And Phil said he wants a lead singer for his new band, and I told him, "You're it. So have these wankers drive you to Los Angeles International Airport, and there'll be a ticket waiting there for you for San Francisco at PSA desk." Yes. And I got them to do that, and flew to San Francisco, was picked up in a 1952 Cadillac limousine, went to the Fillmore West with Phil, took acid for about the fifth time, I think, or sixth time. Excuse me. And had a very psychedelic evening. I don't remember much about what happened after that. But the next day, I was to have my audition with Michael. So I sort of got myself together, and I had my little Rickenbacker 125 solid body 12 string, and Michael came in green tie-dyed coveralls and engineer boots with a studded motorcycle jacket and a leather chauffeur's cap with a matchless motorcycle M on it, and a beard halfway down his chest. Looked at me and said, "Hey, Frank Sinatra." Because I was about that skinny, I think I must have weighed all of 90 pounds wet in those days. And so I ran through a couple of songs, just tried to showcase my singing skills and my finger picking skills on the 12 string. And he went, "You're it, man. Wow. You're more than I expected." And so kind of went to my head, and well, I'm really rather good then, I suppose. It was the first time that I'd ever sort of, had any real input as to whether I had any talent or not, or whether it was worth going on.
Yes, my God, that's quite extraordinary.
Yes, it was very encouraging. So I joined the band, and we played around San Francisco quite a bit. Played for a Hells Angels party at this place called Pepperland, which was this amazing, gigantic hall with sort of paintings all over the walls from Sgt. Pepper's, and giant quad. It was the first time I'd ever seen a quad stereo system in a PA that had giant horns for speakers, and there were people sort of on acid sitting in these speakers with the loudest music you could ever imagine. My ears rang for days. And anyway, we were doing okay, but then we got blackballed by Bill Graham because Michael wouldn't quite kowtow to Graham's the way that he wanted, the obeisance that he expected from all his artists. And so we couldn't get any work for a long time. And I was getting despondent again because I was, I do like to eat and drink and stay.
Yes, I could imagine coffee and oranges. So what was that band called?
That was called Loose Gravel.
Loose Gravel, right, got you.
There's a recording that was on Rough Trade, and I think it was re-released years later by Bump of Michael's. I think it's eponymous. Loose Gravel was the name of the record.
Right.
And it was my very first recordings. If you Google it, you can hear them. It's there's a few songs. I do this one song by an ex-Charlatan member called Daryl DeVore, who was their keyboardist after a guy called Byron Ferguson left. And it's called Stacks of Air. And it's a really kind of airy, psychedelic tune,
yes,
which showcases my vocal talent well. And it was the first recording, my very first professional recording.
Amazing. Because you do look like quite a tough bunch here, don't you? The photograph of the band.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a sort of motorcycle themed, because the rest of us didn't have motorcycles. It was only Michael. But, we wore leathers.
Yes, well, absolutely. That's amazing. So you did a couple of recordings in the studio, which came out later, didn't you?
Yes.
And that was it.
It's Pacific High Recorders in San Francisco, produced by Richard Olson, who had been the bass player of the Charlatans.
Right. So did that period feel quite strange? Because you were at that age where, you mentioned the Manson murders and that dark period. There was a lot of, there's various assassinations as well going on. Then there's the death of Hendrix, Morrison, Joplin as well. And then you had Brian Jones the year before.
Yes.
Things didn't end well for the 60s, though it had a good period in the middle bit. But did it feel a bit strange that you were just coming into that age where it felt like the party had finished on a downer, really?
It was very dark and apocalyptic in some ways because of the Vietnam War and because of all this this darkness in the scene, as it were. Especially in Los Angeles and San Francisco, like Haight Street had become a really nasty place. All the businesses had been boarded up, and there were rows of police marching down the street, busting people's heads and arresting people. because there was a crackdown, on all of this because of Manson and all that. That people were outraged. Joe Citizen was up in arms against the movement, as it were. But of course, there wasn't really any cohesive movement. It was just people doing what they do when they're out of their minds.
Yes. And are most of the members of Loose Gravel, have they passed away, or are they mostly still alive?
They are mostly passed away. I'm sorry to say. I don't know of any that are alive. I left after 6 months, and what happened was, in about September 1971, just after my birthday, the band was pretty fragmented. Michael was doing his own thing and playing acoustically, because it was all he could really get together was playing, by himself in various coffee houses and, just to make ends meet.
Yes.
And so I was kind of left out in the cold and living off food stamps and having no work whatsoever. And I was about to once again, turn my sail toward home. And we had done a tour with Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks.
Fantastic. We love Dan Hicks.
Yeah, Dan was the drummer of the Charlatans. And it was a tour consisting of Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks and the Flamin Groovies, and I think it was It's a Beautiful Day, which was a San Francisco kind of hippie, folky type of group.
Yes.
The Flamin Groovies and Loose Gravel. And in the course of that, we played in Nevada and then drove for hours and hours to Nebraska, where we had a bunch of gigs at the university, where I saw Son House in his very last performance, which was very sad because he was obviously very inebriated and having trouble tuning his guitar and having trouble playing slide. And then he'd finally just given up and said, "I want to go home." And these two girls came and escorted him off the stage, and it was very sad.
God.
Yeah, that was because he had been, such a wonderful performer in good days, but he was obviously past it, and he passed away very soon afterwards. Anyway, so in the course of this tour, I became quite chummy with the Flamin Groovies, and especially Cyril Jordan, the lead guitarist. And we shared various herbal and chemical entertainments, and found we had a very similar taste in music. And, we would talk endlessly about records, and we became quite good friends. And we had a mutual friend in San Francisco who was James Farrell, the guitar player of the Groovies. It was his flatmate named Clifford Culver, who sadly passed away some couple of years ago. And we used to meet at their place and have record playing sessions, and whoever, had some new record, and would bring it by, and, we'd have beers and chat about music. And
yes.
So we'd become quite close and quite friendly. And the Flamin Groovies had heard that I was leaving. I was making plans to leave. One night, towards the end of September, Danny Mim, the drummer, Cyril, and George Alexander, the bass player, came over to the house I was staying at. and said, "Look, we heard that you have plans on going back east, and we'd like to invite you to stay, and if you would consider being the lead vocalist of the Flamin Groovies." And I was completely flabbergasted, because I thought they said, "Well, Roy has evinced no further desire to be in the band. He wants to branch off on his own and get into acting, and he's hasn't had his he hasn't had any skin in the game of late, as it were, and we think you would be ideal to fill his shoes." And I just went, "Gosh, yeah, okay." Because the Groovies had a recording contract, and with Kama Sutra Records, and they had already done one album for them. They'd done an album for Epic, Super Snaz, that was very well. Very, very well critiqued, and
Yes.
And did very well. So I had to break the news to the guys to Michael and these other fellas, and just say, "Look, I've got to look out for myself here, and Michael, you're obviously going to be all right." And although he did get very emotional about it, as did I.
Yes.
It was a move I needed to make for my own well-being, if nothing else. So we were able to pay Michael back years later when James Roy got back into music. He his acting career didn't take off, and he started another band in about 1974, 75, called the Phantom Movers. And James and Roy were very good friends, as was Danny. And Danny had left the Groovies. I'm getting ahead of myself now. Anyway, I joined the Groovies, and we were working on an album for Kama Sutra, and suddenly we got the heave ho
Yes.
Kama Sutra. I guess the new VP did not care for the band's low record sales, and we were summarily dismissed from Kama Sutra. So there we were. We had all this, we had a load of songs and all this talent and all this desire to finish a record. And we went, well, what do we do? What do we do now? So we made a rehearsal, a tape at one of our rehearsals in Danny Mims' living room at 48th Avenue in San Francisco, out near the beach. And we had our friend Walt Zacks, who was a medical student, who later became director of San Francisco City Hospital, and had babies named after him that he'd saved, from stillbirth and things like that. He was quite a great medico.
Yes.
He was a bit of a dab hand at recording, and he had a 6-track, 8 Akai recorder. So we recorded this live set. Excuse me. God, the pollution here is terrible.
Oh.
You wouldn't think so, but it is. And this became a record later called Grease, which was released by a guy called Mark Zamasi on Skydog Records in France. And I think it's one of the greatest live records I've ever heard myself. It's full of energy. It's got great performances from everybody. And we were quite happy with it. And so we used that as a, our work tape to take down. And we went down to Los Angeles, drove down in Cyril's 1956 VW Bug down the newly opened US Route 5, Interstate 5, which was quite a daunting journey, I can tell you. And so we took it around to various record companies and didn't get much enthusiasm. So we were quite dismal. We didn't know what to do.
Because these recordings are mostly all covers, aren't they? There's like, is this the one with?
No, it's well, there's a couple of covers, but it's about half and half covers and originals.
Is this the one that has things like River Deep, Mountain High?
Oh, no. This is long before that. This is 1971.
Oh, this is 19. Well, I think I've got the wrong release. I think this was a bit later, wasn't it? This one where you've got things like "And Your Bird Can Sing" and.
Oh, yeah, no, that's the Gold Star tapes.
Right. God, there's so much to research.
It's an awful lot. It's an I mean, there's been so many
recordings,
iterations of the band and whatnot. And so in 1973 was kind of a nowhere year. Danny had gotten fed up and he left the band. 74, we were at a loose end, didn't know what to do, and we got an offer from Capitol Records. A guy called Ken Sassano had heard that we were at a loose end and paid for us to come down to LA to record two sides at Capitol Tower Studios in the basement of the big Capitol Tower.
Mm-hmm.
And we had recorded. Oh, so I missed out the whole of going to Britain in 1972.
Oh right, my God, you'd had a British trip by then as well.
Yeah, I completely. It's easy to get it.
So the Flamin Groovies with you went to Britain.
Yes, in 1971. After I joined the Groovies, and we'd taken this live tape around to Los Angeles, didn't get any action. We had gotten some interest from the head of A&R for United Artists Records in London, a chap called Andrew Lauder. And Andrew had sent us again down to LA to meet with the head of A&R for United Artists in Los Angeles. Oh God, I can't. His name slips my mind now. Danny something. And we got to his office 5 minutes late for some reason. I can't remember why. And he said, "You guys are late. Put your tape on." So went over and put the cassette in, and he kind of sat there going, and after a couple of minutes, he went, "No, take it off. Take it. It's too vague. It's too vague. Sorry. Thanks for coming down. See you later." So we were completely depressed by this,
Yes.
Slunk back to San Francisco, although some of the other people in the office said, "Oh, that really sounds great. We'll try to work on Danny, but to no avail." So we spent the rest of 71 wondering what to do. And Andrew was saying, well, there's a chance I can get you over here. And, we have a couple of other American artists. We've got Don McLean. He comes here quite often and records. And we work with Dave Edmonds a lot. And we were like, Cyril and I were like, bingo, Dave.
Yes.
As we had heard, Cyril had brought over the single that had come out. I can't remember. I think it was I Hear You Knocking, which was great. And, I remembered it was a big hit in the States. It was huge. But the B-side was this fantastic multi-level, multi-guitar version of a Stephen Foster song, which was Old Black Joe, that Dave had turned into I'm Coming Home.
Oh. God, I have to check. Right. And that had come over to the America by then. Yeah.
And we were absolutely flabbergasted by the guitars on this version, and just the energy and everything. And then we found that Dave had recorded it all. He'd recorded all the guitars, he'd recorded the drums, the bass. Oh no, he didn't record the bass. That was John David, and produced it. We thought, God, what a wonderful guy to be able to work with, Cyril, as soon as it was available, got the Rock Pile album, the first one with Dave standing in front of the barn at Rockfield.
Yes.
And on the back is a picture of him in the garden of his house in Monmouth called the Greys, which was like a 15-room house made from the stones of Goodrich Castle, of all things, and had arrow slits. It was fabulous. And he was there with all his gear set up. I think he was rolling a joint with his 2 Yorkshire Terriers by his feet. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? What a beautiful place. I would love to see that. And about 8 months later, I was standing in that exact spot.
Fantastic.
Completely, what were the chances of that?
Yes.
So, we were enamored of Dave Edmonds greatly. And we mentioned this to Andrew Lauder, and he said, yes, well, we work with Dave quite a bit. Some of our artists, Brinsley Schwartz, and Nick Lowe was in Brinsley Schwartz at the time. And he said, we'll do our best to get you over here. But then after a couple of months, nothing happened. So Cyril kind of forced his hand. Cyril, at his own expense, flew over to London in, I think it was May 1972. Got together with Andrew, and they hashed out a tentative plan and deal and whatnot. And so Cyril came back and ran it by the rest of us, and we were all for it. And so then by the beginning of June, we were on our way to London. And we had a gay old time doing that. And I can tell you. And we got to London and were put into a very posh hotel at the time, the Clive Hotel in Belsize Park. And we didn't know anyone really. I had a couple of relatives in the area that I hadn't seen since childhood. And outside of a few fans who happened to have heard that we were coming, we didn't know anyone. So we were kind of stuck there. We didn't know London very well. And so we were kind of stuck there in Belsize Park with not a lot to do. So we just availed ourselves of the 5-star cuisine and the very ample bar that it had. And I think we ran up a 2,000 quid bill in as many weeks.
Right.
It was quite stunning to the record company.
Yes.
didn't have a signed contract with us yet. So, yes, we were chastised for being too free. We also had a mini car hire company who was at our disposal, who said, anything you want, mate, I'll get it for you. You want a ham sandwich 5 a.m, you got it. You know, you want some Charlie, you want this, you want that, you know. So he said, just sign this docket here, you know. So he run up this huge bill.
Blimey, yes. So did you do any recording at this stage in London or Britain?
Not in London, but this is by the time we did the first show we did was the Bickershaw Festival in Wigan.
Oh my God, that was very muddy, wasn't it?
Oh, was it ever?
And the Grateful Dead played as well.
A whole load of people played. I met Captain Beefheart and Dr. John. I indulged in some refreshments with them in the Warner Brothers caravan there. I can tell you that's a whole nother story. Cheech Chong, the Kinks were on right before us, and had a terrible bust up when Ray, they were doing Demon Alcohol. I was about 10 feet away behind Dave Davies' amp, and Ray had been hiding this can of Special Brew under his coat, and he had been shaking it up, and then he turned it, oh, Demon Alcohol, and he turned around and opened it, and it sprayed all over Dave. And Dave went fucking ballistic. And there were fisticuffs, and the roadies had to get involved, and the crowd went nuts, and it was insane. And then just before we came on at 1 o'clock in the morning, there was like this mini Altamont in the front of the stage, and the stage was dizzyingly high. It was like it had to have been 25 feet at least. And it was just a sea of mud under it. And it was raining, and it was very dangerous because we were getting zaps off the microphones. So, and these bikers, I guess they were Hell's Angels, or not quite sure, Gypsy Jokers or somebody, started beating hell out of this hippie at the bottom of the stage. And we came on to this, and I had to come up, and my first lines, rather than singing, were like, hey, leave that guy alone or we're not playing. And I saw him to his friends, and they picked him up and cleaned him off and went, right, all right, mate. Yeah, there's no problem. Yeah, it's all right. We're just having a bit of fun, you know. So, anyway, then we went into our set, and were very well received by the audience. There was an awful lot of people. I mean, it must have been over 50,000 people. I've heard varying numbers, 50, 100, whatever. I don't know. It was a sea of folks anyway. And we got a great hand. And unfortunately, melody maker journalist named Roy Hollingsworth had been on the stage, backstage, and just before we came on, the road crew, or the stage crew, oinked everybody off the stage because it was getting dangerous. It was very slippery. There was water everywhere, and the threat of electrocution was very real. So they threw everyone off the stage, and Roy Hollingsworth was one of these people, and he got very miffed, and he didn't like it. And he thought we had something to do with it, and we were pulling like power trips or whatever, you know. So nothing of the sort at all. But that was his impression. And so he wrote a scathing review of us in Melody Maker. We got good reviews in all the other papers, in NME and
Sounds.
New Musical Express, and Sounds. We're all on our side, but Melody Maker panned us terribly and got very personal, which is always uncalled for.
Yes, absolutely. So did you see anybody else there? Because there was quite a lineup, wasn't there? There was the incredible string band, Linda Lewis, Country Joe, and the McDonald's. So did you get a chance to sort of, apart from seeing the Kinks having issues, did you get to see many other people?
I got to see the incredible string band. I got to see with the Kinks, obviously. Pacific Gas and Electric, who were we had done a couple of gigs with in San Francisco, in small, quite a bit smaller venues, and they were quite fun. And we saw Captain Beefheart and Dr. John, and by that time we had to get back to London. And it was a very hard place to get out of this festival site because the roads were practically impassable because of all this rain.
Yes.
But in the meantime, after our set, I don't know where the other guys disappeared to. Suddenly, I was like the only one backstage, and this girl that I had known from Los Angeles who worked for Warner Brothers came to me and said, Chris, would you like to come over to the Warner Brothers caravan because Derek Taylor would like to have a word with one of you? And I went, oh my God, Derek Taylor. And I went, Cyril should really go. He's the sort of band leader, but where the hell is he? So I took it upon myself to go.
Yes.
And I got there, and Derek said, just a minute, Chris. I'll be out to see you in a moment. He was back in the depths of this large caravan. And at this sort of little breakfast nook was Don Van Fleet and Mac Rebenak, two of my most favorite people in the world. And I was absolutely gobsmacked. And standing there, I believe I was trembling a bit. And there was a bowl, a sugar bowl full of cocaine on the table. And I was looking at that. And Dr. John looked up at me and went, "What's the matter, kid? You look like a dog that needs a bone." and I just said, well, he said, "No, look, ask for everybody, help yourself." And Captain Beefheart was just laughing his head off. So I took a huge sort of spoonful of Coke and nearly choked on it. And he said, "Golly, you can't fly with one wing." So I took another one. That was completely out of my mind by then. And he proffered me a bottle of Southern Comfort, I believe. And I took a long pull off that. And then I was okay.
Yes, well, that's amazing. And I think, did Hawkwind play as well at that festival?
I believe so, yes. I did, but I'm pretty sure they were there.
Yes.
That's Schwartz. I had the itinerary and all the running order and that for years. I've lost it over the years. I don't know what happened to it, but it had all the artists and times and all that. So, and it was really quite an impressive group.
Yes, well, absolutely. And at that stage, had you written Shake Some Action? Had that already been done?
Yes, it had. We showcased it at that show. As we did Slow Death, which we then recorded. After that, after Bickershaw, and I spoke to Derek Taylor, and he wanted to sign the Flamin Groovies. Just as a quick side note, he was ever so lovely and charming a guy, and I knew him from Beatles days that he'd been the Beatles publicist. And, he was a really lovely character. He was just such a wonderful guy. And had done so much in rock and roll and for rock and roll. And so Cyril was very miffed that I'd actually gone and talked to him without him. And I said, well, what was I to do? You weren't here.
Yes.
So we arranged, a meeting was arranged with them in London for Cyril to go speak to Derek. And Derek was offering us a wonderful deal. But Cyril felt some kind of loyalty to United Artists, which was misplaced, as it turned out. Had we taken Derek's offer, things may have been very, very different.
Mm.
But unfortunately, not.
No.
And
so Shake Some Action, can you remember how that song came about?
Oh, that came about in San Francisco. Cyril and I was staying at Cyril's mother's house with him. And we were farting around with guitars one afternoon. And Cyril had a song that wasn't complete and needed some lyrics. And I had some lyrics and I had some licks that I didn't know what to do with. So we thought, well, let's try to put them together. So we sat down with a bottle of Southern Comfort or something, I don't remember, and went over these various things we did, and as musical collaborations happen, we came up with Shake Some Action after a few hours. And, over the next couple of days, we sort of refined it and honed it and found what worked and what didn't. And bingo, there it was, and became our sort of anthem, over the years, and a song that, along with like Slow Death, that we always had to play no matter what,
Yes. And so when was the first time you went into the studio to record it?
We went into Rockfield in, I believe it was the beginning of August. No, sorry, end of June 1972.
Right. And this was produced by Dave Edmunds.
That's right. And Rockfield Studios at the time was pretty primitive. It was just the accommodation was just the old farmhands bunkhouse, because it was a dairy farm.
Yes.
It was still a working dairy farm, in fact. And Kingsley Ward and his father and his brother, Kingsley's brother, Charles, ran the farm. And they had, 50 or so Frisian cows. It wasn't a big operation, the farm. And Rockfield was only in the old potato loft of this other, not the buyer, the cow barn, but another old barn. And there were these kind of derelict stone stables, because the studio had actually been owned by Charles Rolls of Rolls-Royce back in the early part of the 20th century. And he bred his favorite kind of horses there, which were Shire horses. And he had a huge stable of Shire horses that he raised there. And I believe he was actually killed in a Wright brothers aircraft in the rock field, which was close by.
Wow.
In 1908 or 1910, something like that.
Blimey, O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Yes. So, was that your favourite version of the song? Was the one with recorded there?
Not really. I have to say that the version that we recorded 2 years later or a year later in 1973 at Capitol Studios was my favorite. Because I don't know, it just didn't. I didn't like Dave's production of. I thought it was too kind of swirly, whirly, and not punchy enough, which was how I'd envisioned it in my head. But, you know, we gave Dave full reign to do whatever he wanted in the mix, and that's how it came out. And so
Yes.
The second version that we did for Capitol is with a guy called John Wilson, no relation, as producer and engineer, is more what I had envisioned. And it's also backed by one of my favorite songs that Cyril and I wrote, which is called When I Heard Your Name.
Right.
Which has kind of got a kind of ethereal folkiness to it. And it's a really nice ride out at the end. And we had a really good time recording it. We were staying with a friend named Michelle Meyer, rest her soul, who was a big personality in LA and knew everyone. And we came home from the studio one night, and Brian Wilson was there with the lead singer of the Association. And Brian was completely out of his mind.
Yes.
When we were living in London, we had a house in Chingford after the hotel debacle. Brian Wilson's wife and her sister recorded for United Artists under the name of American Spring, and did an album for UA in the summer of 1972. And we became very good friends with them after meeting them at the offices. And they came and stayed with us in our big house in Chingford, in Hyams Park. And there was talk of us collaborating and doing this and that. It never really gelled for some reason. So they stayed with us for a month or so, and while they were working on the British part of this recording. I think they did it at Olympic. I can't remember who produced it. Anyway, it was all redone in LA, and I believe Brian produced it in the end. Right. Kind of side note, you know.
No, but it's
one of those things that happen.
Yes. So then where did the band go from? Were you then going back to LA at this point?
Yes. Well, what happened was the association with United Artists kind of fizzled out. There were some personal and professional discordances between us and various members of United Artists. And Danny Mim was kind of he was a very brash kind of person, and he pissed off a lot of people at the label, like the art director. And when they were redoing the offices, they were repainting them, and we were in the offices in Mortimer Street in London, and Andrew said, "Oh, if you guys want to, like paint something on the walls, maybe they'll keep some of it." Or, well, Danny went into the office of the president of United Artists, and he called Martin Davis, and Danny did a very nasty sort of. Danny was a very, very, very good artist, and he did this mural that had rather disturbing Nazi overtones. And Martin, being a Jewish chap, did not take kindly to this.
No.
As did I. I was horrified, and I couldn't believe it. It just like, what a dumb thing to do. He thought he was being funny. He was like that, and people didn't get his humor.
Yes, a bit tricky.
So Martin that was it. That was kind of last straw. Although he did try to come over and buy us with 2 bottles of Johnny Walker Black Label one afternoon and wanted to be our manager. And we promptly drank both bottles and said, well, nah. No, I don't think so. It's, we're looking for other talent. And that was the last.
Yes.
And so by this time it's November 1972. There were no further recordings planned. They put no further money into any of our promoting any of the records that had been recorded. We were informed by the company that our services were no longer needed, and that we were. But in the meantime, I had gotten a letter from the draft board in Massachusetts, saying that I was being sought by the FBI. Oh no, it was by the Home Office sent me a letter saying that I was being sought by the FBI for draft evasion. And I'd already determined I wasn't going to go to Vietnam because both my brothers had been, and they said, you won't like it.
Yes.
And they said, we bled there. No reason for you to don't do it. So, and I had no qualms. If the people of Vietnam wanted to be communists, more power to them. Off you go. I hated the American government and Richard Nixon and the whole thing. So I was going to do anything I could to stay out of that.
Yes.
So, we got all our stuff that we had accumulated in our nearly year-long stay, and put it in a big box, and it was air freighted back to San Francisco some days later. In the meantime, we flew back to San Francisco. Oh no, we flew into O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And at that time, of course, long before computers, and as you went through customs and immigration, they had a big book, this incredible tome, and you gave over your passport, and this agent took the passport and put it in a thing, and then took this huge book, and I guess it was updated daily, and went up and down it and passed you your passport back. And he passed all of our passports back. We went through, and we thought we'd all gone through. And then we were on the other side of, the control, realized James wasn't with us. And James, I just turned 20. James was 25. And he had gotten his draft notice as well. And what our lawyer at the time had said was, look, both of you just go to England. If you get out of the airport, fine. You write your board from England saying, I'm in England. People are taking care of me. I'll be back. I don't know when, but I will come back. And as soon as I can, I'll come back and we'll talk about my status then, which is what we did. So, yes. And I had gotten a notice that the FBI was looking for me, as did James. But I managed to squeak through, but James did not. And this is the day before Christmas Eve, 1972.
Blimey, in Chicago.
Yeah, freezing cold. It was cold in the airport, let alone outside, where there was 45-mile-per-hour winds and snowdrifts. And we looked, and we went back through the control area to the control point, and there was James looking very peaked between two crew-cutted, suited individuals who were obviously FBI agents. And Danny said, "Hey, you can't take that guy. You know." And Danny started to get in their face, and they just said, "Look, you don't leave now, you're going to be arrested." And so he just said, "Well, good luck, man." And poor James was then taken to a holding area. We were on the phone to our lawyer trying to find out what he could do, and but we had a connecting flight, so we had to get out of there.
Yes.
And James was in this holding cell where this old African American dude came over and said, "My son, you're in a deep lot of trouble. You probably going to go to Cook County Jail, and that's a terrible place. And if they take you there, you ask for Sonny Bill, and you say that Pops said that you was okay to Sonny Bill, and he take care of your ass. He make sure nobody mess with you." And James, oh God. So they kept James in that cell for, I think, 12 or 16 hours.
My God, he must have been a wreck.
Yeah. And then the FBI came to him and said, "Look, you're not a violent criminal. You haven't really done anything wrong yet. We don't know whether your draft status is, whether this is right or wrong, but we're not willing to put you into custody on Christmas Eve." I don't know if James had been able to. I can't remember whether he got to utilize his one phone call. And James's father was a war hero, by the way. He was a decorated survivor of the Bataan Death March. He was a U.S. Marine captain, and might have had something to do with it. But they said, if you give us your affidavit that you will report to the FBI offices in San Francisco, at the federal building in San Francisco on January 2nd, we'll let you go. And James did. He said he gave him his undertaking that he would do so, and off he went. And was able to get a flight to San Francisco the next day.
Wow.
So we all met up, and our lawyer, Brian Rohan, his name was, a very famous music business lawyer who worked for us for years and always for gratis, pro bono. He did all his work for us. He loved the Flamin Groovies. He was a wonderful, wonderful chap. He died about 7-8 years ago. And he arranged for James and myself, because just after Christmas, a couple of days, I was smoking a joint in Cyril's house and happened to look out the window one morning, and a very government-looking car pulled up, and two crew-cutted dudes in suits got out, and I went, "Whoosh, I know who that is." And I told Sir, tell them that I'm not here. Tell them I'm down in LA or something. And so it was the FBI. And they said, "Well, tell Mr. Wilson that there's a warrant out for his arrest by the FBI, and he needs to get in touch with us at his earliest convenience, to prevent any further unpleasantness."
Mm.
So we called our lawyer, and he said, "Okay, I'm on this." And he got James and I, a very famous San Francisco trial lawyer called Michael Stepanian, who represented us both. Went down to the federal building in San Francisco at the Hall of Justice, the top of the Hall of Justice, this big skyscraper in San Francisco, all the federal agencies are, and federal courts. And I was buzzed into this room through this huge door that was like that thick. It kind of moved half a wall over. And once you were inside there, you weren't getting out unless they wanted you to. Excuse me. And so my lawyer just said, well, here's Mr. Wilson. He's perfectly ready to follow any instruction that you may give him. And they said, well, are you ready now to take your draft physical and do your service to the country? I said, absolutely. There's all a big misunderstanding. I'm ready to go. And they said, oh, well, okay. Well, you'll get your notice in due course. And off we went. And Michael Stepanian slapped me on the shoulder and went, see, I told you. Because I had been absolutely wetting myself beforehand.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got a psychiatrist who wrote us. We told him a story about how screwed up we are. He was a chap from Oxford, and he said, "Tell me a story, Chris." And I went, "How do you mean?" He said, "How exactly how messed up are you?" And he said, "Make it good." And I said, "Oh, is that how you want it?" He said, "Yes, and I'll take it from there." So he sat and took notes on, and you wouldn't want me for a dog catcher, let alone in a military unit, And James did the same. And James got his draft notice and went to the draft board, gave them this letter from the psychiatrist, and they just read, the medical officer read it and went, for it. And off he went. Unfortunately, by the time I was supposed to be doing this, Richard Nixon had been impeached. And Gerald Ford was now the president, his vice president, and had pardoned his incredibly guilty ass. And to try to smooth over, and the Vietnam War was winding down and was extremely unpopular. But they were still taking 700 guys a week.
Mm.
He proffered this chance of alternate service, where rather than being drafted into the service, you could do alternate service, like community service, as it were. So I was able to secure a job at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, who were big Groovies fans. And I came in a few days a week and went and fetched peri dishes from the St. Mary's Hospital to take down to there for them to use to screen syphilis patients and gonorrhea patients, and that was mostly what it was STDs, because there was still a lot of homeless people, hip speed freaks, and acid casualties littering the Haight-Ashbury area. And I had a very, very good reputation with the clinic, and did a lot of work for them. And I did actually do a lot of work. Actually got certificates from them saying that my help was invaluable. I learned a lot about sexually transmitted diseases. I can tell you that I really did not want to know. And
Yes.
yeah, so don't interrupt. Sorry, that was my missus. So we were able to skirt not going to Vietnam, but and the Haight-Ashbury Clinic allowed me to leave and play gigs and do whatever I had to do. Now, it's been an hour and a half. I don't know how much longer you want this to go on, David.
Well, it's just yes. Well, we haven't actually got to the band. Actually, well, the next phase.
I'm cool. I've got nothing on this afternoon, so.
Well, I love to sort of do the whole musical gig, and your next the Groovies, and then. But as long as you've got the time, then
Your time.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Yes. So
by this time, unfortunately, the session with Capitol was shelved because a new vice president came into the department and shelved all of the projects that were going on. So all this money that had been spent on our sessions, which is a considerable amount, were just tax write-offs. This was a common thing in those days too. So we didn't know what to do. We had no drummer. We for the sessions in Los Angeles, we'd had a friend of Michelle Myers called Terry Ray, who was he had been drumming for I think he was in a Los Angeles group called the Guardsmen of the Palace Guard or something like that. I can't remember.
Yes.
No, that was later. Belt Up. What can I do? Terry played drums exquisitely well on those two songs, and but he was poached away from us by Kim Fowley.
Oh yes,
who was he was an acquaintance of ours over the years. I'd met him in 1971 when we were down in Los Angeles trying to oik this work tape. He was a thoroughly entertaining but completely bonkers individual. And he always had projects going on where, he was signing up young people and he would then promptly take all the money from their signings and leave them with nothing. And this is what he did to the Hollywood stars, which he poached Terry for.
Right.
So we were again with no drummer and no offers. So we wanted to go on the road and just start doing performances. We needed a drummer. And a friend of ours who was a fan, Jeff Richardson, his name was, and he was from Omaha, Nebraska. And he had a friend called David Wright, who was a drummer. And he was a very good drummer, and he was at a loose end. And he was working he was very financially well off. And he was working with his brother at what do you call them? Not a slot machine, a fruit machine, not a fruit machine, Oh, they did have fruit machines as well. Pinball machine.
Oh, right. Yes, got you.
that they owned, and they did all, and they sold the machines to people and whatnot. And that's what he was doing. But he wanted to be a drummer again. And he was a big Flamin Groovies fan. So Dave came out to San Francisco, and we got on with him incredibly well. And so we started rehearsing and making some just, little recordings of our rehearsals, and at a house that he had rented in the Sunset District. And by this time, James had left the band and was playing with Roy and Danny in Roy's band, the Phantom Movers. So we wanted another guitar player. And we found that Michael Wilhelm from the Charlatans, who I had started my career with, that he indeed also was at a loose end. And so, because we wanted this 3-guitar lineup, because we thought it filled out, the sound, having 3 lead rhythm guitars that could, God, it's terrible here.
Yes.
It's really bad. We liked that sound because it gave us a kind of wall of sound on stage. So we approached Michael if he would like to be in the band, and he agreed. And just before James had left, we had done some sides with Greg Shaw of Bump Records down in Los Angeles. And Greg had been a fan for years. And he had started this little label. And we said, well, we'd love to do something for you. And we did a version of the Paul Revere and the Raiders song, Him or Me, What's It Gonna Be? And backed with one of our songs that we had done with Dave Edmunds in London, called You Tore Me Down. That was what the original song we wanted to put forth as our first single on United Artists, but they chose Slow Death instead.
Mm.
And Slow Death, unfortunately, had the line, I want a mainline, a hit of morphine. And the BBC found this objection. So we couldn't get any airplay. And so that record languished and, obviously did nothing in the charts in England, which started the whole, United Artists debacle going downhill. Yes. So we did those 2 songs for Greg. And on the strength of that, Greg took it to his friend, Seymour Stein, who had started a small label called Sire. Small label, soon to become rather big.
Massive, label. Yes.
And Seymour was a fan, apparently. And but like all record company executives, bands and business, the business always takes front seat. So Seymour, though, liked the songs, and he wanted to hear more. And he asked what we wanted to do, and we said, well, we want to go back to England, and we want to record at Rockfield, and we've got a bunch of songs, and we'd like to do it as the format that we like to do, which is, like kind of 5 or 6 original songs and 5 or 6 covers that we like to do, that we have fun doing. And he said, yeah, I like that idea. And bingo, suddenly here we are again. He gave us a $5,000 advance. And $5,000 in those days went a long way.
Yes. And
we bought a whole back line of pre-CBS Fender dual Showmans. Nobody wanted them. Everybody wanted Marshalls and Orange and whatnot, and we wanted some nice traditional dual Showmans, twin reverbs. We went into this guitar shop, Satterley and Chapin in San Francisco, a very old shop from the 20s. And we asked Mr. Satterley if he had any Gretsch guitars, because Cyril and I wanted to get that sort of Beatles, rubber soul kind of guitar sounds. So he said, do you have Rickenbackers? And he said, do I have Rickenbackers and Gretches? He had a whole room full of Rickenbackers and Gretches, brand new, in their cases, which we got for a steal. I got a 1964 Gretsch Nashville, and these were the deluxe models that had a pad that went on the back, a big leather pad held down by 13 snaps. Okay, he's going to World Market. Yeah, she's miffed because I'm not going now. And I also got a Gretsch Viking 12-string, which was, I think it was a 64, 65. These guitars now are worth $20,000. And I got
Amazing.
I got both of them for $400.
Wow.
So, with this money, we were also able to get fabricated touring cases for them, flight cases, hard shell flight cases for all the amps and the guitars with our logo on them, because we weren't just going to go to Europe and record. We were going to go to Europe and tour as well. And that was the beginning of a wonderful 10-year period. Well, not really 10, more like 3, actually. It was from 75 to 78, where we did a lot of work, and we were just constantly on the move in the studio or touring extensively in the States or Europe.
Yes. And that's where you went back, you recorded at Rockfield to do the album Shake Some Action. And again, you had Dave Edmunds at this stage, still the controller. And was it quite an interesting period? Were you picking up on that punk scene that had started with people like Dr. Feelgood and the Doctors of Madness and the Damned? Was that starting to sort of percolate slightly?
It was indeed, yes. But we were the antithesis of it. We hated it.
Right.
Still do. Even though I became friends with some guys, like guys in the Clash, and like especially Mick and Paul, and several other bands, we didn't get on with a lot of them.
Yes.
Especially the Damned. We had them off a tour for slagging us off in the press in 1977, 76 or 77, I can't remember. But the recordings at Rockfield were phenomenal. In 75, we did the Shake Some Action album. 76 was basically touring throughout Britain and Europe. Then we came back in 77 to record Flamin Groovies Now at Rockfield.
My God.
That was my favorite period, because we were doing very well. We had a lot of money and a lot of ideas, and it was, we were riding around limousines everywhere and just having a gay old time doing it.
Yes. And what was it like when you got to your 6th studio album, which was the Jumping in the Night? That was 79. What was the state of the band at that stage?
That was done in August 1978.
Right.
by this time, Seymour, by the time of Flamin Groovies now, Seymour was starting to be a bit recalcitrant and wanting us to do things the way he wanted them done rather than the way we wanted them done. And we didn't want to do that. And Greg Shaw had been our manager for a bit with Seymour, but then we realized that Seymour had blackmailed him into doing whatever he wanted by saying that he would withhold his financing of Greg's publishing projects if he didn't steer us the way Seymour wanted.
Yes.
And we found that out and had to sever ties with Greg, although we were still quite good friends over the years. And you know, he's a lovely guy. And yeah, we still got on with him, but we couldn't have that. So our dealings with Seymour were always spiny. You know, it was, we were making him some money, but not enough by his standards. And he wanted more of our publishing, which we did not want to give him.
Yes.
We wanted our own publishing rights, you know. So that was a sticking point. And he did some nasty things to us, like he didn't pay our bill, storage bill in 1976. We came back from the States. We came back to the States from Europe and left all our gear in London because we were ostensibly coming back in a couple of months. But then Seymour started this wrangling, and our storage bill went up to 800 quid, which was a decent amount of money at that time. And the trucking company at the time who was storing it, Edwin Shirley, musical, movers and touring company, they sent him bills which he totally ignored. And so they sold all of our gear. They sold like 30,000 quid's worth of gear for 1,000 quid.
Yes.
And we were completely wiped out in a day.
Yes.
And we were absolutely, it was the end. I mean, we were just distraught. We had nothing. All our equipment, all our amps, all our guitars, except for a few acoustics and stuff that we had in San Francisco.
Blimey.
So, but Seymour had just done a deal with Warner Brothers for his distribution. And Warner's, it got to this news got to one of Warner's legal office, who was a fan. And he was outraged and said, no, they can't do this, leave it to me. And he flew over to London and he got some British attorneys involved. And he sued Edwin Shirley because it was totally illegal what they had done, and got everything back. Got all of our equipment and all of our flight cases and everything back. All of our reverb boxes and echoplexes and all the various bits of gear, except one Rickenbacker 3/4 John Lennon Rickenbacker, which Cyril had for years, which the guy they sold it to said, "No, I ain't giving it back," and disappeared.
Right, yes.
So
disappointing.
That just staggered what we were supposed to be doing and put it off. So God almighty, we finally got back, did Flamin Groovies now. That was outside of Seymour not paying our bill for a month there, and we had to stop recording in the autumn of 1977. I think it was the whole month of October we didn't do any work. We were just stuck at Rockfield. We're still getting our per diems, but we couldn't record because Kingsley said, I haven't been paid in a month.
Right.
Finally, Seymour coughed up the money, and we were able to finish the record. It duly came out, to great critical acclaim, and but very poor sales because the records were not in the shops. And so we had big kerfuffles with Seymour over that. The band was working incredibly well. We were touring and making money doing that, having a great time. But if you don't have your record deal is in tatters, then you can't really, it's a pain. It's just something that, it's anxiety, not knowing what you're going to be doing from week to week.
Yes.
So, come 1978, we were coming back to record. We'd done a tour of Europe. By now, we'd come over in April, May, June. We'd been touring all over Europe, from Scandinavia to Andalusia, and we were very, very hot. We were ready to do a record, and we got back to London. And Seymour, this is in the end of July, and Seymour said, "No, you're not doing a record in London. I can't get Rockfield. Rockfield's booked up, and you're coming back to the States." And we were horrified because, we had an album's full of stuff ready to go. So we started approaching other people. We approached Island. We approached RCA, several others. We were getting very positive, reactions, and people saying, getting what do you want, what they were prepared to give, what they were prepared to do. And word got back to Warner Brothers that we weren't going to be doing a record. And the president of Warner UK, John Fruin, was very miffed at this. And he called Seymour and said, I want the Flamin Groovies. Either they're going to be on Sire or they're going to be on Warner Brothers. But I want them to do this record. And so if you don't want them to do it on Sire, I'll sign them to Warner Brothers directly. And Seymour thought, oh, my God, oh, God, then Fruin will have them and he'll do something with them. And because I really think by this time he had this kind of a deep hatred for us and wanted to sabotage anything we could do. Cyril had been indelicate in some of his conversations with Seymour, and I think he took it to heart and got very, he was kind of wanted to hurt us.
Yes.
So anyway, he had to relent, and I had all my clothes, all my stage clothes. Actually, every stitch of clothes I had, except the clothes on my back, stolen from this horrible hotel he had put us in Bayswater, in London, in like a really horrible flea pit, because we were only supposed to be there for 2 days and flying home. So he didn't put us in anywhere nice, obviously. And they were stolen my traveling suit bags, 2 custom-made leather suit bags and a trunk. with all my boots, and everything. All my Anello and David boots, all my Granny Takes a Trip clothes,
Oh, God.
thousands of dollars worth of gear. And all I ever got back was 500 quid from the hotel fraud squad. So anyway, I had money, so I went and I couldn't replace those things because Granny Takes a Trip and their tailors didn't exist anymore. So I just had to clobber together whatever kind of clobber I could. Cobble together.
Yes.
Cobble together the clobber.
Yes.
So we had heard some recordings done at Eden Studios, where actually Dave had done some recordings recently. And we wanted to record there, and he'd been produced by a chap called Roger Bashirian, who had done a lot of bands and was very popular. And he was a lovely guy and very, very talented. And he knew Eden Studios very well. That was his turf, as it were.
Yes.
And so we approached Roger, and Seymour was amenable to having him produce. Excuse me. Dave came down for the first couple of nights, and we paid him some money, and he just basically got pissed and took off. He was, unbeknownst to us, he had contractual agreements with Jake Riviera and Stiff.
Right.
He could not produce anyone outside of their stable. So we didn't know that. And that was it. So no Dave Edmunds, Flamin Groovies. Il est parti.
I mean.
So we approached Roger, and he said, yes, I'd be happy to do it. And we got to work. But because Eden was so popular, we had to record only from, I think we got 6 at night to 6 in the morning for a month. We lived at night and recorded at night. Well, we sort of did anyway.
Yes.
And rather than staying in a hotel, Warner Brothers had rented us a houseboat on the Thames at Shaney Walk. Hang on, David. I'm starting to wheeze. I need...
The Ventolin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I can...
Yeah, I'm starting to wheeze. That's bad.
Oh, yes, my God. You've got the whole...
Yeah, I've got really bad asthma.
Yeah, so I sort of, had asthma since the age of 4, so I'm very familiar with Ventolins and salbutamol and all those nebulizers.
Yeah, it's horrible. But it helps. So
It does, yes, absolutely.
that's much better. Come here, let me get some more water as well.
Oh, yes, I'll get my socks.
If you can see
back again. I just putting some different socks on.
Okay.
Yes, so look. So
these are actually all the records that my fiance worked on at Warner Brothers.
Oh.
She was the personal assistant of what was his name? I knew him, but can't remember his name.
Yes.
Lee Hirschberg, who was, among others, Frank Sinatra's producer.
Okay, I love that Pretenders album.
Yes, and she met George. She did some work for George, and Madonna, and
yes,
That was her when she left Warner Brothers. That was her.
That was her leaving party present.
Yeah.
Blimey, God, she's quite rock and roll.
Yes, rock and roll girl. That's her handle on.
Oh yes, it's true actually. So, was at this stage, are you doing Flamin Groovies now or Jumping in the Night?
Flamin Groovies now.
Right. So this is the one with Dave.
Yeah. No. With Roger Bashirian.
Right.
David left the scene.
Yeah, that's the one. And yeah, so this is the one, and this is all done at Eden Studios.
Yes.
Oh.
It was very wearing because even though we were kind of night owls, working all night and sleeping in the daytime is kind of a drag. And living on a houseboat on the Thames wasn't the day at the beach we thought it would be, because there were various things you had to do, like empty the bilge, and making sure you didn't do that unless the tide was going out.
Yes.
Cyril did it when the tide was completely out, and of course that's not a good thing to do with bilge.
No, that would be a disaster, wouldn't it? Really. So that was generally then quite an exhausting period, was it?
It was very stressful for the band, and although we came up with some great songs which we wrote on the houseboat pretty much. We'd had lots of ideas that we'd been forming on the road, but basically, it's what we did when we finally woke up in the day before we went to the studio. We'd get together and have a play and try to figure out what we were going to do.
Oh my God! So that was yes. So when did that album come out?
That came out in. Well, that was August 78. We got it finished by early September. Came back to the States, and I believe it came out in 79.
God. And what was the reception like at this stage?
It was patchy. It was very patchy.
Yes.
And because Seymour had pretty much washed his hands of the band. And so there were no records in the shops. Warner Brothers did what they could to rectify that, but they eventually got fed up as well.
Yes.
And the focus then went to all the punk bands.
Right.
And the estimation was made that we were past it, that our brand of rock and roll was no longer popular, and forget it.
God, that must have been tough going.
It was because, we were true to our beliefs and our art, as it were. And, it was kind of, yes, it was soul destroying, because we wouldn't kowtow to the new regime. I wouldn't know where to begin. We didn't know how to play badly. I mean, we did. So it kind of languished and nothing much happened. The band was growing apart. Michael wanted to do his own thing. We weren't getting a lot of work in the States. So we had nothing to do for a while. In 1980, this guy, Mark Zamati, who we had met in 1971 in France, and we'd given him our work tape to start off his record label, which was called Skydog.
Mm.
And he had grown that to quite an influential label in France, and also had a lot of British talent on it. He, by this time, was doing rather well, and he suggested that he could put out an album of ours in 1980. And we didn't have many original songs. He said, "Oh, that's not a problem. Do whatever you want to do." And he had gotten the backing of Rolling Stones Records.
Right.
And they were interested in distributing it and putting it out. And so they hired Gold Star Studios in Los Angeles, very prestigious studios with everyone recorded, the Beach Boys, John Lennon, Ike and Tina Turner. So, it was like, wow, this would be happening. We were put up at the Chateau Marmont, this fabulous, golden Hollywood hotel.
Yes.
Excuse me. And so we got to work on it. Unfortunately, by this time, there were, drugs and alcohol were taking too much of a toll on us. I was kind of fed up with the whole thing. I was kind of fed up with the States. I wanted to be back in Britain. And I had married a Scottish girl and wanted to be back in. I wanted to move to Scotland, basically.
Right. Yes.
And I wanted to. I was kind of sick of touring and just sick of the whole Flamin Groovies story by then. It was going downhill rapidly. Cyril was wasting a lot of time in the studio that pissed off Rolling Stones Records. They spent 3 hours slamming the studio door to try to get this big kaboom. And that's like $500 an hour, or I think it was more. It might have been like $800 an hour to slam a door for 3 hours. The Dominique Lambleur from Rolling Stones Records was not amused. And he called me over to the chateau, to the main part, because we were staying in the bungalows out the back. And he said, "Chris, I'm sorry, I can't countenance this waste of money. I don't like what's being done, and I understand Phil Spector's going to be involved," because Cyril was trying to get Phil Spector involved, and he said, "We don't really want him involved in any of our business anymore." And so he said, "I'm sorry, your hotel's paid till the end of the week." And this was on a Monday. And he said, "I'm leaving. I don't want to talk to Cyril because he's too intransigent."
Right. Blimey.
Off he went. So I had to break the news to Cyril, who went completely hairless. No pun intended. He went nuts, and we had a falling out where he nearly killed us both, fucking, as I tried to get a butcher knife out of his hand because he was going to go and kill Dominique Lambleur. So I left the band. I just said, "That's it, I'm done." I called my wife at the time and said, I'm coming up to San Francisco. We're going to get it together and leave and go back to Britain.
Yes.
was a big fan, and she didn't want to see that happen. So she phoned them and told them where I was. And they drove up, and Cyril leapt out of the car and started, assaulting me. So I had to stop him from assaulting me, which I did with extreme prejudice. And anyway, we patched it up briefly. We went on to finish this record under very, very dire circumstances of totally being fed up and totally being out of our minds on drugs. And it shows in the recordings. I mean, they're subpar.
Right.
It's later come out as the Gold Star tapes, which it didn't on Skydog, and it's very few people have ever heard it. The one thing we did do that turned out very well was River Deep Mountain High. We did a cover of that by Ike and Tina Turner in the very studio that they recorded it in.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that was 1980. 81 came with, just a few gigs around the San Francisco area, culminating in us doing a drug dealers convention at the Miyako Hotel, this large Japanese complex in Japantown in San Francisco, which I left the band that night, which was Halloween night, 1981, because Cyril had double booked this date, and we'd already been paid by these guys to do one set and then drive across San Francisco on Halloween night, which is a hellscape. I mean, you can't imagine what it's like. It's like the gates of hell opened up. There are crazy people everywhere, traffic everywhere. It's nuts. And I said, no, I'm not prepared to do that. And he said, well, you're out of the band. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Have a nice. I finished the night playing with an English friend of mine, playing some blues, bottleneck stuff, and so I left the band. I stayed with some friends for a couple of months in the Haight-Ashbury district, the nice part, in a big house, my wife and I, and then we determined that we wanted to go back to Britain, and we raised the money to do so. And January 28th, 1982, we were back in London.
Blimey, there you go. So then, what's the next parts of your journey? Because you then, you always stay in music, but then do you join another band quite soon after that?
I did. And that was January. So I was knocking around Camden Town and Islington. We were staying in the Hornsey Road in Islington, in Highbury, Islington. And I'd heard of a British band in 78 and 79 called the Barracudas. And I'd heard some of their stuff, and I was quite impressed with them. And they were playing at a very famous music pub in London called the Hope and Anchor.
Yes.
In Islington. And so a friend invited us down and said, yeah, you must hear them. They'd be over the moon if you came. So I came down and met the lads, and they were very nice. And I met Jeremy and Robin and Jim Dixon, very tall Australian chap on bass. And the drummer at the time he was sort of I don't know, he had a kind of charisma bypass type of guy. And he wasn't in the band long. I can't remember his name. Graham something.
Oh.
Anyway, I love them. They did a great show. They invited me up to play Slow Death with them, and they did a Stormin version of it. And I said, what you guys need is you need me. And of course, I was pissed as a rat. And I woke up the next day and went, oh, God, what have I done? Tell these guys I joined their band. I wonder if they'll hold me to it. And so I got a call from Robin, who said, Robin Wills, and he said, you did say you joined the band last night. And I said, did I? And he said, well, we'd be happy if you would. And I said, oh. And that was the start of a wonderful period of, we did 2 great records at Rockfield.
Was that Meantime?
Meantime and Endeavor to Persevere.
That's right. So you were back in the band doing the business.
Mm-hmm.
My God. So that took you up to the late, because that came out in, that was the mid, wasn't it? So 83, and then Endeavour to Persevere was 84, which came out then. So then what happens? I mean, that's obviously a bit of a better experience. Then what happens to you then from the mid 80s?
Well, the Barracudas broke up, and I went to Sweden for a year to play with some friends in Stockholm. I lived in Stockholm for a year. Fabulous, fabulous time. I played with a guy called Linus, who had been Janis Joplin's boyfriend for some years back in San Francisco. He left San Francisco the day I arrived, strangely enough. And I met him all these years later in London. I met him in Stockholm, excuse me, when the Groovies had played there. And the Barracudas had done several gigs in Stockholm, and I became friends with him and African-American artist from New Jersey called Leon Matthews, who he had been in the punk scene for some years. He was friends with all the guys from the E Street Band and the Bosses sort of stuff. And so we wound up doing some recording at ABBA's studios, which I don't think ever came out. I think Leon still got all that stuff.
Right.
He lives in Germany now. Linus sadly passed away some years ago. So I stuck Stockholm for a year, but then it was like, no, the winter there, no, no, 25 below zero every day for a month is like, no.
Yes.
Couldn't hack it. So I came back to London. My wife and I had split up by then, and I was living in Belsize Park, and I was playing on and off with a bunch of just friends who had very checkered musical histories. John Gunsel was the drummer of Chicken Shack for many years. Tony Ashton, Edward Anthony Ashton, who played with George Harrison and was in the Remo 4.
Yes.
Early beat group, I guess. I think they were from Liverpool. I can't remember. Archie Leggett, who was in the Balham Alligators and had played with loads of people. Clive Robin Sarstedt, who was the brother of Peter Sarstedt, both of whom were good friends of mine. I was in Peter's band for a little while.
Right.
Singing and playing harp, and I love Peter, God rest his soul. Those were really, really fun times. And Clivey and I toured, just the two of us, around Europe. Had a wonderful time doing that. In 1992, James, Danny, and myself got together in San Francisco for Patrick Boissel, who had Maryland Records. And we did a few sides, and I did some with an Anglo-American group called the Sneetches.
Right.
With Alec Palau and I can't remember the drummer's name from the Stingrays. Very, very good drummer, great chap. These were just sort of fun things. Not much ever really happened with them.
Yes.
Sadly, because they were very good records. I then sort of in the 90s, I sort of just kind of put it away for a while. I was living with my partner in West Hampstead, and she was retiring from the makeup artist industry, and we got a house in Powys, and I was fixing that up, and I planted an orchard there and doing stuff like that. It's kind of normal stuff.
Nice. Yes,
it was. It was a wonderful period. I really enjoyed it.
Yes.
Sadly passed away in 2001 from cancer. And I was bereft for a couple of years. I was just completely rudderless and didn't know what to do with myself. And very, very just emotionally drained and downtrodden in my 50th year.
Yes.
So anyway, I'd gotten back in touch with Robin of the Barracudas, and I was playing with his rhythm section. I was doing some blues sort of numbers with his bass player, who was Rob Coyne, Kevin Coyne's son.
Oh, yes.
And their drummer, a chap called Jan Quellian, a Frenchman who goes by the name of Gooey Louie. He's a fabulous drummer. And we were doing some blues gigs. We had another bass player named Joe, who was a Anglo-Spanish guy who worked in tech. And he was a wonderful bass player. And we put a group together called Chris Wilson and Friends, later to be called Chris Wilson and his Groovin' Flames.
Right.
And we did a couple of we did a few gigs in London, mostly at the Boston Arms in Tufnell Park.
Mm-hmm.
I was living at the time. I had moved to Kentish Town. And we didn't quite get to do any recordings, unfortunately. There's some live stuff on YouTube that's quite good, actually.
Yes.
That was just kind of a nowhere period, actually, as well. Then the Barracudas, Jeremy, Robin, myself, Rob Coyne, because Jim Dixon had gone back to Australia and was playing with the New Christs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And Jan and myself and the Barracudas got back together with Jeremy, and we did some touring around. We did a few records at a studio in North London that was a dairy once. I can't remember what the hell the name of it was now. We did a side for Robin that Robin had written called God Bless the 45, because he's a big record collector, He's like, his house is basically, records from floor to ceiling.
Yes.
as mine used to be when I was younger. But yeah, it's hard carting records around the world with you.
It's horrendous.
So Barracudas did that, and did another record. Did I cannot remember the name of it. That must have been 2006, something like that. We did that in the city of London, some little studio in the city, and I can't remember the name of it or what happened with it or anything. Just gone.
Yes.
Gone out of my brain. You would have to talk to Jeremy about that, because maybe he remembers. He did a really creepy song about a serial killer. Pee Wee Gaskins. Jeremy had written this song, and I was horrified by it because I read that he gave me the book about this guy, and I was horrified that he would even want to even think of writing a song about this dude. I mean, it was horrendous. I still have nightmares about thinking about this guy.
Yes.
It's really trouble. The Final Truth, it's called. Don't ever read it. You won't really. It'll give you nightmares.
Yeah, okay, I'll avoid that. So then what? So that's the Barracudas. They do various bits and pieces, and then this is getting into 2013. So what was it like getting back with members of the Flamin Groovies?
Well, I had been doing from 2008 to 2011. I did some recordings with a chap called Anthony Clark, who was an old fan of the Flamin Groovies that I met in the early 90s. And he lived in Surrey, what's the big town in Surrey?
No, I'll have to have a Google the Surrey County. Yes, so he was down in Surrey.
Yes, if I can remember the name of the town.
Surrey County Council. God.
It's near Red Hill, this place. Oh, God, I can't remember the name of it. Oh, it's famous because it's got these salt mines from the Napoleonic Wars and Roman times, and it's got a lot of medieval shit.
Oh, that's where the Battle of Hastings was it?
No, that's way south. Reigate.
God, for a starter of 10, we're there.
Laurie just screamed that out from the other room.
There you go. Well done, Laurie. We needed that bit. We would have been stuck. Yes. So you were there.
Yes, and there was a studio called Panther Studios right across the street from Anthony's flat. So I would go down to Anthony's and spend some days going over his songs, and I would add some ideas to his songs, and he'd add some to mine, and so we co-wrote a bunch of stuff, and we walked across the street and recorded it. It was very nice because, like, Anthony's house was here, the studio was there, and the pub was there.
Nice.
So ideal situation. And we did 3 records over from 2001 in 2008, one in 9, and one in 11. And the one in 2011 was called "It's Flamin Groovy."
Yes.
And Anthony was able to get the participation through MP3s from America of George Alexander, Cyril Jordan, Michael Wilhelm, James Farrell, I think Danny. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think Danny might have had something to do with one of them. And they're all playing on our songs, doing their little bits. And so I had met Cyril again in 2011 when he came over with Roy to do some numbers, to do a short tour of England, and we kind of patched it up. So we were still, sort of became friends again, and were corresponding. Although it's hard to correspond with Cyril because he's only just in the last 2 years gotten a mobile phone, and he doesn't do tech. He doesn't do computers or anything like that.
Right.
He says it's because he'd never have any money because he'd be online buying toys and magic tricks and things like that all the time, which is probably true. So in 2013, I was approached by a Japanese chap in London who had brought the Barracudas over. We went over in 2012 to do 3 gigs in Tokyo at this club called Shindaita Fever in Shinjuku, in the Shinjuku prefecture of Tokyo. And it was great. We had a great time. And this guy kept bugging me if, the Flamin Groovies would ever do it. And I said, well, don't know, we haven't played. And in Christmas of 2012, I went to visit George in Arizona. That's where he lives. He lives outside of Tucson. And I spent 3 weeks with George out in the desert, and that was fun. We had a gay old time at his wonderful mansion in the desert. Because George has fallen upon good times, and he's doing very well.
Right.
So, we kicked it around, like, would that be feasible? So we'd see who we would approach to do it. So Cyril was amenable. So Cyril, me and George, that was going to be the center of the band. I wanted to get James and Wilhelm involved, but nobody else was too keen on it. So Cyril hired a drummer, Victor Penalosa, who had been in the Zeros and was a big fan. And that was it. We were going to do it as a 4-piece. Which then we got an offer from the Hoodoo Gurus to do a festival that they put on every couple of years called the Dig It Up Festival, where they dig up some old friends of theirs to come down and play with them in some shows around Australia. So I, brainstorming and barnstorming, thinking, okay, now what we could do is go to Tokyo and do these gigs for whatever his name was.
Yes.
The Japanese chap. And then fly on from there to Australia and do that. And amazingly, it got together. Through absolutely no further work of mine, because I wasn't in any position to do any. I think it was mostly by the guy from Shindaita Fever and the Hoodoo Gurus did most of the legwork for getting it together. And the Hoodoo Gurus are great friends.
Yes.
And lovely, lovely guys all. I played with them the last time they were in Portland, and we had a great time. So there we are. It's the first time the Groovies have been together, Cyril, George, and I on stage, and it worked out rather well. Though Japan is a tough place to gig, and very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So, but see, I have this thing where I don't get on with people. And if I don't get on with them, I had a tendency to, rather than call it a day, to just put up with it and drink myself stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing this because I didn't really get on with Cyril. I love the guy like a brother, but he just gets on my nerves. I'm not the only person to say this. And my drinking was getting out of hand. And I hated touring now, like doing the same old thing of piling into a van, with aircraft seats, into a Mercedes van with no toilet or no ability to, stretch out and sleep while living for 10 hours a day. It's like, no, I can't do that. I won't do it. It's not good for my health.
Mm.
So by 2018, from 2013 to 18, we toured all over Europe and all over the States. And we did 90 shows or something like that. And I just couldn't hack it anymore. I could not hack it. And the last show I did with the Groovies was in Mexico City. And I got so ill just from the air there. And plus I was drinking too much and smoking tobacco still, and my lungs were, suffering.
Mm.
And I just went,
Tell me about the ghost.
What ghost? Oh, God. Yes. I mean, Mexico City, it's kind of a hairy place. I don't know if
No, I've never been there.
It's wild, and it's the highest capital city in the world. People are very nice. I love Mexican people on the whole. They're very, very sweet.
Mm.
And we were treated very, very well. We played in this theater. And of course, like I was afraid of, there are a few fans, but nobody really knows who the hell the Flamin Groovies are in Mexico. So we played at this theater, and very nice old theater, very old. And as we arrived in the place, we were putting our stuff in the backstage area, and I saw this this kind of old lady in a very pretty kind of red velvet dress, and she was looking at me very sternly, and I said, "Buenas noches, señora. ¿Qué tal?" She didn't say anything. She just kept staring at me. It was kind of, a mad look on her face. And I went, "Oh, okay, carry on." So the other guys came in, and I looked back, and I didn't see her. And I went, "Who the hell she was?" So in the backstage, there was this rather large, what looked like a hammock slung over the back of the room, and it was kind of red velvet hammock, kind of all, but more like all bundled up, I thought, well, that's weird. I wonder what that is. So as we were talking after the show was great, but there was about 70 people, in this place that could hold 300. So it was, everybody
Yes.
took a bath on that. And uh, as I was talking to the owner, who spoke English very well, and I said, "Oh, by the way, was that your mother or someone? I saw this old lady when I came in. This kind of elderly lady. She's very strikingly dressed in this red velvet dress." And she went, "Oh my God, you see the ghost?" And I went, "What?" And she said, "The lady that used to own this theater. She was very nice old lady, but she ran this theater like it was her domain. And when she died, she wanted to be buried in the theater, but they wouldn't let her do this. So they buried her in the cemetery down the street, down the road. But this place became so haunted that they gave in and they took her body back and they put her here. That's her, the red velvet thing.
Right.
This woman's remains. And the red velvet lady that I saw was her ghost. And I'm telling you, as I'm looking at my missus right now, she looked like that. Very chilling.
Yeah.
Very chilling.
Blimey.
Wanted GTFOH real quick.
Yes.
And yeah, it was, I didn't like it. That was a very weird ending to my career in the Flamin Groovies.
Yes.
Had to go into rehab soon after that. And since we did one more gig with the NRBQ in Sonoma, at a winery in Sonoma, California. As a favor to my manager, I did it because I wasn't getting paid. And I really didn't want to play with them because they're assholes. As much as I like their music, they're a bunch of creeps. And so I got completely out of my mind on alcohol. Went and played the show and just had a horrible bust up and came back and went into rehab a month later.
Blimey, that is extraordinary.
6 years now, 5 years.
That's one hell of a way. So then
6 years I've been clean and sober.
Nice.
Well, except the odd cannabis gummy and anxiety medication I have to take. That's not getting high. That's just trying to keep from going insane. You know?
Yes, well, absolutely. So now you're in Oregon and taking it a bit more easy.
Trying to, you know. I'm staring at my 5 guitars over in the corner there, or 4 guitars rather, and wanting to do something with them, but not really knowing what.
Yes. So since this decade, you've done no music?
Yeah, pretty much.
So where do you think next year will take you?
I don't know, Dave. I really don't know. Because we don't know what's going to happen here. With the new regime, the new dictator coming in.
Yes.
I can't even believe I'm saying these words, and I'm talking about the United States. I don't know what's going to happen. We hope to either move to France or somewhere else other than where we are now, which is like a hillbilly hell. It's just we're outside of Portland. It's not very nice, and Portland has become a terrible place. It's riven with drugs and crime. There's so much crime. And this little place where we lived, this little town, was lovely when we moved here 10 years ago, but now it's the whole country's really in turmoil. and it's a terrible thing to have to face. And I have a court settlement I'm waiting on, which, if it comes good within the next few months, hopefully, will secure our future and we'll be out of here. And yeah, I have a daughter and grandchildren in Paris, so that would probably be where I'll end up.
Right, there you go. A little bit of nice culture in Paris.
Oui, bien sûr.
This would be fantastic. Well, look, thank you. Thank you ever so much for this. This has been quite epic, actually. And thanks, Laura, as well. I'm sorry that her shopping trip was slightly spoilt there. Just 2 weeks before Christmas. And
Not at all, not at all.
well, look, thank you for your time. I'm going to have to go to bed, actually. But look.
Oh, yes, God almighty.
Yeah, it is quite late, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, but look, it was quick, it was brief, it wasn't. But look, that has been amazing. And look, best of luck for next year anyway. I hope your settlement happens and you can have a new adventure somewhere else.
Bless you, David.
Yeah, well, take care. And thanks again to Laura. Take care.
Hope we meet.
Yes, definitely. Take care there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm hit end. Oh, perhaps I'm not. Listener, is the end of the interview, and congratulations if you managed to get to the very final bit, because frankly it's fantastic. A massive thank you to Chris Wilson for giving me the time for that interview. Anything you want to know, do just Google, hit your search engines with great excitement, the Flamin Groovies, the Barracudas, and various other bits and pieces. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just do C86 show. Have a great week. Stay safe.